I was cheated by the woman I built an empire for. She spent my money on another man and tried to erase me, but I took her to court, exposed the truth, and reclaimed the life she nearly destroyed. Jack Thompson sat in the Davidson County Courthouse, his calloused hands gripping the arms of a creaky chair as his wife's voice sliced through the room. He's a pickup truck in a world of sports car. Useful, but nobody's dream ride. The Nashville courtroom erupted in laughter, a cruel wave that crashed over Jack's broad shoulders. He didn't flinch. At 36, he'd learned to weather storms, on construction sites, in late-night fights, in a marriage crumbling under the weight of 1 million likes. But today, in this family court, Brianna's words weren't just a jab. They were a declaration of war. The trial was the final act of their divorce, a public unraveling of 10 years. Jack, a blue-collar carpenter with a face etched by labor, sat in a faded denim jacket, his hazel eyes fixed on the judge's bench. Across the aisle, Brianna Thompson, 34, glowed like a filtered photo. Blonde waves flawless, white blazer crisp, every inch the social media influencer with 500,000 followers. Her posts sold dreams, sunlit brunches, yoga poses, captions about living your truth. But Jack knew the truth she didn't post. The missed anniversaries, the cold silences, the way she'd rewritten him as a footnote in her empire. The judge, a woman with steel gray hair and sharper eyes, banged her gavel. "Order," she said, her voice cutting through the snickers. The gallery, reporters, fans, curious locals, hushed, but their stares lingered on Jack, sizing up the man Brianna had just gutted with a smile. He felt their judgment, heavy as the August heat outside, but kept his face still. Inside, his chest churned. Not with anger, though there was plenty of that, but with the ache of a promise broken. He'd built their life nail by nail, only to watch her pose on the ruins. Brianna's lawyer stood, a slick man named Hargrove, his suit screaming money Jack had never seen. "Your Honor," he began, "my client is a visionary, a brand built from nothing. Mr. Thompson, while reliable, couldn't match her ambition. He's a man of limits, and their marriage suffered for it." The words landed like punches, each one framing Jack as the anchor dragging Brianna down. Dependable, sturdy, outdated. He'd heard it before. Not here, but in her sighs when he came home smelling of sawdust, in her eye rolls when he suggested a quiet night in. Brianna leaned forward, permitted to speak. Her voice was smooth, practiced, the same tone she used in sponsored posts. "Jack's a good guy," she said, pausing for effect. "But good isn't enough. I needed a partner who could keep up, not hold me back." She flashed that smile, the one that got 10,000 hearts online, and sat down, her heels clicking like a gavel of her own. The laughter swelled again, louder this time. Even the bailiff smirked. Jack's hands tightened, knuckles whitening, but he didn't look at her. He stared at the brass scale of justice above the judge, its gleam a faint anchor in the chaos. He thought of their early days, cheap diner dates, her head on his shoulder, their shared dream of a little house with a porch swing. He'd worked double shifts to fund her vlogging gear, believing love meant sacrifice. Now she'd turned that sacrifice into a punchline. The judge's voice broke through. "Mr. Thompson, your response?" Jack's attorney, Emily Carter, rose. A young woman with a folder thick as a brick and eyes that missed nothing. She didn't posture or preen, just nodded to Jack before facing the bench. "Your Honor, my client isn't here to chase followers or headlines. He's here for what's fair. Jack Thompson carried their marriage, financially, emotionally, physically, and we'll prove it." The room stilled, the laughter fading into a tense hum. Jack exhaled, his grip loosening slightly. He didn't know if fairness existed in a place where words twisted like smoke, but Emily's calm steadied him. Then he caught Brianna's glance. Just a flicker, her perfect mask cracking. Was it guilt? Fear? He couldn't tell, but it sparked something in him. Not hope too late for that, but resolve. This wasn't just a trial. It was his chance to reclaim the man he'd lost. Jack Thompson, at 22, smelled of sawdust and ambition. His hands, already rough from swinging hammers on Nashville's construction sites, gripped a pencil as he sat in the back row of a community college classroom. It was 2011, and he was chasing a carpentry certification. Not for a degree's sake, but for the chance to build something lasting. His jeans were faded, his flannel shirt rolled up to the elbows, and his boots carried the dust of a morning shift. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words were steady, like nails driven true. The classroom door swung open one September evening, and Brianna Larson walked in. She was 19, all bright eyes and restless energy, her backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder. Her dark blonde hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her sneakers squeaked on the linoleum. She slid into a seat near Jack, dropping a sketch pad that spilled colored pencils across the floor. "Great start," she muttered, scrambling to grab them. Jack knelt to help, handing her a red pencil. You draw? He asked. She grinned, a flash of warmth that caught him off guard. Try to, mostly fashion stuff. You? Woodwork. Plans, mostly. He tapped his notebook, where a half-finished sketch of a bookshelf sat. She leaned over, curious. That's cool. Useful, not just pretty. That was the first spark. Brianna was studying graphic design, dreaming of magazine covers and city lights. But she wasn't polished yet, no filters, no followers. She was raw, charming, with a laugh that made Jack forget the ache in his shoulders. They started talking after class, first about assignments, then about everything else. She liked his quiet focus, how he listened without interrupting. He liked her fire, the way she'd sketch dresses in the margins of her notes and talk about making her mark. Their first date was at a diner off West End, the kind with sticky tables and bottomless coffee. Jack paid with crumpled bills from his last paycheck, and Brianna didn't mind when he suggested splitting a plate of fries. They stayed until midnight trading stories. Her about growing up in a cramped apartment with big dreams, him about fixing his dad's old cabin as a kid, learning to measure twice, cut once. I want a home someday, he said, almost shy. Nothing fancy, just mine. I'd design the curtains, she teased, then added, softer. I'd like that too. Dates piled up like stacked lumber. Walks along the Cumberland River where she'd toss pebbles and he'd try to skip them. Late nights at a used bookstore where she'd read poetry and he'd hunt for carpentry manuals. A county fair where he won her a stuffed bear with a lopsided grin. They were broke but happy, building dreams on borrowed time. Jack saw a future in her eyes. A porch swing, a garden, her laughter filling a house he'd frame himself. Brianna saw possibility in him, a man who'd ground her without caging her. 2 years later, in a park under dogwood trees, Jack proposed. No ring yet. He couldn't afford one, but he carved her initials into a small cedar box, promising a band when he could. I'll build us a life, Bree, he said, his voice thick. If you're in. She said yes, tears smudging her mascara, and kissed him until they both forgot the world. They married in a backyard ceremony, her in a thrift store dress she'd sewn lace onto, him in a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit. Friends brought potluck dishes, and a buddy's band played off-key covers. It wasn't Instagram-worthy, but it was theirs. Jack took a full-time job at a lumber yard hauling beams and cutting planks, his body growing lean, stronger. He'd come home with splinters, sketching furniture designs by lamplight, determined to start his own shop someday. Brianna, meanwhile, discovered beauty, vlogging. She'd borrow his phone to film makeup tutorials, giggling when she smudged eyeliner. This could be big, Jack, she'd say, showing him her first 100 subscribers. He'd grin, proud, and haul home thrift store mirrors or lights to help her set up. They rented a one-bedroom apartment, walls thin enough to hear the neighbors' fights, but they made it home. Jack built a wobbly table, Brianna painted it blue. He fixed leaks, she hung dollar store art. At night they'd lie on a mattress on the floor, planning a cabin in the hills, maybe a kid someday. We're a team, she'd whisper, her finger tracing his knuckles. Jack believed her. He saw every late shift, every skipped lunch as a brick in their foundation. Brianna's channel grew, 10,000 followers, then 20, and he cheered her on, even when she started eyeing pricier cameras, better clothes. He didn't notice the shift in her voice, how we became me. He was too busy building, too certain love meant giving her the world she wanted. Looking back, Jack would see it, the moment her dreams outgrew his. But in those early days, under Nashville's starry skies, all he saw was her smile, and all he wanted was to keep it there. Jack Thompson's day started at 4:30 a.m., when the Nashville sky was still black. By 26, he was a machine of routine, up before the alarm, coffee brewed in a chipped mug, out the door to the lumberyard by 5. His body bore the marks of labor, shoulders knotted from hauling timber, palms crisscrossed with scars from rogue nails. But he didn't complain. The yard paid steady, and steady was what Brianna needed to chase her dreams. Their one-bedroom apartment, once a cozy nest, now hummed with her ambition. A second-hand desk cluttered with ring lights, cameras, and makeup palettes, her vlogging empire swallowing every spare inch. Brianna's channel had exploded past 50,000 subscribers, then 100,000. By 2015, she was a Nashville it girl, her beauty tutorials and lifestyle posts pulling in brand deals, lip gloss campaigns, athleisure co-line. She'd traded thrift store dresses for tailored jumpsuits, her hair now salon blonded, her nails always camera rinsy. Jack watched her transform, proud but uneasy, like he was holding a kite string in a rising wind. You're killing it, Bree, he'd say, forcing a grin when she showed him checks with numbers he'd never seen. She'd kiss his cheek, distracted, already typing a caption for her next post. To keep up, Jack took a second job, weekend shifts at a construction site, framing houses for suburbs he'd never live in. His hands blistered, his back ached, but the extra cash went straight to her. A new lens for her camera, a ring light that cost more than their rent, a trip to a Miami influencer conference she swore would level her up. He didn't question it. Love, he'd always thought, meant giving her what she needed, even if it left him hollow. At night, he'd collapse onto their couch, too tired for the bed they barely shared anymore, while she edited videos, her laughter reserved for comments from strangers online. Jack's own dream shrank to fit her orbit. He'd once sketched furniture designs, imagining a workshop of his own, but his pencils gathered dust in a drawer. Hobbies, fishing with buddies, strumming a pawn-shop guitar, fell away, replaced by errands for her brand. Pick up lighting kits, drop off packages at the post office, build a backdrop for her fall aesthetic shoot. He'd do it all, sweat-soaked and silent, because her smile when she hit a new follower milestone felt like enough. Almost. Brianna's world was followers now, a language Jack couldn't speak. She'd scroll her phone at dinner, take out tacos on paper plates, since neither had time to cook, muttering about algorithms, engagement rates, staying relevant. "This brand deal could get me to LA, she'd say, not noticing Jack's fork pause mid-air. He'd nod, swallowing questions he didn't dare ask. LA? What about their plans? The cabin? The porch swing? Instead, he'd clear the table, her eyes still glued to her screen. His body paid the price. A slipped disc from lifting beams wrong, ignored until it screamed. Knees that cracked when he stood. He popped aspirin like candy, kept working, kept paying for her editing software, her wardrobe upgrades. At a checkup, the doctor frowned at his blood pressure, said he was burning out at 26. Jack shrugged it off. "Gotta keep things going," he told the doc, meaning Brianna's dreams, their life, the promise he'd made under dogwood trees. Inside, though, cracks formed. He'd catch himself staring at her, filming a "get ready with me" video, laughing for the camera in a way she hadn't for him in months, and feel a pang he couldn't name. Was it love if he was disappearing? He'd pushed the thought down, remembering their early days, her head on his shoulder, her voice whispering, "We're a team." He clung to that, believed sacrifice was the glue holding them together. If he worked harder, gave more, she'd see him again, wouldn't she? One night, after a 14-hour day, he found her packing for another trip. Chicago, some influencer summit. "Need anything?" he asked, voice hoarse from sawdust and fatigue. She didn't look up. "Just don't mess with my setup," she said, gesturing to her filming corner, now a shrine of ring lights and velvet backdrops. He stood there, a stranger in his own home, and felt the weight of every paycheck he'd signed over, every plan he'd shelved. "Love you," he tried, but she was already on her phone, typing. The silence that followed was louder than any fight. Jack lay awake that night, her suitcase by the door like a warning. He thought of his dad, who'd worked himself sick for a family that fell apart anyway. "Don't lose yourself, son," he'd said once, whiskey on his breath. Jack had sworn he wouldn't. But as Brianna's star rose, his world dimmed, and he wondered if love was supposed to feel like this, like hammering nails into a house you'd never live in. Jack Thompson's world had shrunk to the edges of Brianna's spotlight. By 2017, their apartment felt like a stage, every corner dressed for her next post, every moment measured for its content potential. At 28, Jack was a ghost in his own life, his days a blur of lumberyard shifts and construction gigs, his nights spent alone on a couch that smelled of sawdust and regret. Brianna, now 30, was a stranger behind her influencer glow. Her channel had hit 300,000 followers, her face on billboards for local spas and fitness brands. She moved through their home like a guest, her laughter saved for live streams, her warmth reserved for screens. The change wasn't sudden. It crept in like damp rot. Brianna's voice, once soft when she spoke to Jack, now carried an edge. "You're wearing that?" she'd say, eyeing his flannel and work boots as they headed to a rare dinner out. So predictable, thinking she was teasing, but her smirk lingered too long, sharp enough to cut. At a friend's barbecue, she'd roll her eyes when he grabbed a beer instead of her preferred rosé, muttering. Jack brushed it off, but each jab landed heavier, chipping away at the man who'd once felt solid in her eyes. Their shared dreams, the cabin, the garden, were gone from her vocabulary. She talked about lofts in L.A., rooftop bars, vibes Jack couldn't picture. He'd try to join in, suggesting a weekend at Percy Priest Lake, maybe rent a canoe. "A lake?" she'd scoff, strolling her phone. "I'd rather fly to Miami for the same price." He stopped suggesting. His tastes, diner coffee, old country records, a beat-up truck he'd named Betsy, were relics to her, punchline for her stories. "My husband's stuck in the 90s, she'd say to her followers, her laugh bright but brittle, and Jack would overhear from the kitchen, his jaw tight. Time unraveled them further. Anniversaries, once sacred, slipped by unnoticed. Their fifth, in 2016, Jack had planned a quiet night, reservations at a steakhouse, a playlist of songs from their dating days. He'd waited in a tie he hadn't worn since their wedding, but Brianna texted at 7 p.m. at a shoot running late. Rain check? She came home at midnight smelling of wine and perfume, her phone buzzing with notifications. "Sorry, babe," she'd said, not looking up. "Work's crazy." He nodded, the playlist looping unheard, and boxed up the leftovers. Alone. Her trips multiplied, weekends in Atlanta, then weeks in LA, always networking. She'd return with suitcases of new clothes, her wrists sparkling with bracelets Jack hadn't bought, her stories vague. "Met some producers," she'd say, waving off questions. "Big things coming," Jack didn't press. Though the credit card bills he paid, still in his name, climbed higher. 1,000 here, 2,000 there, charges for hotels and boutiques he'd never seen. He'd stare at the statements, his stomach twisting, but tell himself it was for her career, for them. He felt her absence most at night. Their bed, once a tangle of limbs and whispers, was now a cold expanse. She'd fall asleep with her phone, its glow painting her face, while Jack lay awake, the hum of the city outside louder than their silence. He'd trace the scars on his hands, nicks from saws, burns from rebar, and wonder when he'd stopped being enough. Had he ever been? Desperate to bridge the gap, Jack planned one last gesture for their 6th anniversary in 2017. He couldn't afford much, but he scraped together enough for a weekend at a Smoky Mountains cabin. Simple, no Wi-Fi, just a fireplace and a view. He spent weeks sketching a route, picking trails they could hike, imagining her smile when she saw the stars without city light. He gave her the plan in a manila envelope, his heart thudding. "Thought we could unplug," he said, voice low. "Just us." Brianna opened it, her face blank. "A cabin?" she said, flipping through his handwritten notes. "Jack, I've got a collab due that week. And no signal, really?" She tossed the envelope on the counter next to her smooth blender. "It's sweet, I guess, but meh." That night, she posted a story, a selfie with a caption, "When your vibe's more city lights than campfire nights, priorities." Jack saw it on his phone, the word meh burning into him like a brand. He didn't sleep. The envelope sat untouched, his hopes curling like ash. He thought of their wedding vows, her hand in his, promising forever. Now, forever felt like a sentence, and he was serving it alone. As dawn broke, painting their apartment gray, Jack realized something colder than her distance. Brianna wasn't just pulling away. She was rewriting him out of her story, and he'd been too busy building her world to notice. Jack Thompson's hands shook as he sat at their kitchen counter, a stack of unopened mail before him. It was late 2017, a rare evening when Brianna was out networking again, her latest trip to LA stretching into a week. At 28, Jack felt older than his years, his body worn from double shifts, his heart heavier still. The apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the fridge and the distant wail of a Nashville siren. He'd meant to sort bills, a chore he'd always handled, but tonight, the envelopes held more than numbers. They held the truth he'd been dodging. He sliced open a credit card statement, one he didn't recognize. Mailed to Brianna's P.O. box, not their address. His name was still on the account, a holdover from when he'd co-signed to help her brand. The balance hit him like a fist, $12,437. Charges he'd never seen, hotels in Beverly Hills, a boutique in West Hollywood, dates that matched her trips. His pulse thudded as he tore into another envelope, then another. Hidden accounts, thousands more, all linked to her name, his credit, a secret life, paid for with his sweat. Jack's phone buzzed on the counter. A notification from her Instagram. Her stories were public, a habit she'd kept despite her 400,000 followers. He tapped it, not expecting much, but the image froze. The room spun. Jack stood, pacing to the window, Nashville's skyline blurring through his anger. He'd given everything, his time, his health, his dreams, for her. Built her sets, paid her bills, believed her lies. And she was posting this? He grabbed his phone again, hands unsteady, and called her. No answer. Texted, "We need to talk, now." Nothing. She came home at 2 a.m., heels clicking, perfume sharp. Jack was still at the counter, statements spread like evidence. "What's this?" she said, eyeing the papers, her voice casual but tight. "Who's Derek Ray?" Jack asked, his throat raw. He held up his phone, her story frozen on the screen. Brianna's face flickered, surprise, then defiance. She set her purse down, slow, like she was buying time. "A contact," she said. "He's helping my career. Why are you snooping?" "Snooping?" Jack's voice rose, breaking months of restraint. "These accounts, Bri. Thousands I didn't know about. Hotels, jewelry, him. You think I'm blind?" She crossed her arms, her jaw set. "You're overreacting. It's business, networking. You wouldn't get it." Business? He shoved the statements toward her. This is my name, my credit, my life. And you're posting with some guy like I don't exist? Her laugh was cold, a blade in the dark. Jack, you're too boring to keep up. You think I'm gonna stay stuck in this? She waved at the apartment. This nothing life? Derek's got connections. He's going places. You're just… The words hit harder than the bills, the photos, all of it. Jack stood, chest heaving, searching her eyes for the woman he'd married. She was gone, replaced by this stranger who saw him as a stepping stone. I gave you everything, he said, voice low, cracking. Everything. Brianna shrugged, grabbing her phone. Then maybe you shouldn't have. She walked to the bedroom, door clicking shut behind her. Jack sank into a chair, the statements crumpling in his fist. He saw it now. The years of excuses, the trips, the distance. Not a phase, not stress, betrayal, plain and cruel. He thought of their vows, her hand in his, and felt them shatter. This wasn't love. It was theft, of his trust, his future. Himself. As dawn crept through the blinds, Jack made a choice. He wouldn't beg. He wouldn't break. He'd fight for what was left of him. Jack Thompson sat in a cramped office that smelled of coffee and old books, his work boots scuffing the worn carpet. It was early 2018, weeks after Brianna's betrayal had cracked his world open. The Nashville skyline loomed through a narrow window, but Jack's focus was on the woman across the desk. Emily Carter, a 30-year-old attorney with a sharp jawline and sharper eyes. Her suit was crisp, her desk stacked with files, but her handshake was firm, no nonsense. I don't do lost causes, Mr. Thompson, she'd said when he called. Now, staring at the wreckage of his marriage, Jack hoped she meant it. I just want what's fair, he said, voice low, his hands folded tight. She's got her brand, her followers. I've got… Emily leaned forward, pen poised over a legal pad. Then let's start with what you put in, all of it. Jack laid it bare. 10 years of double shifts, lumberyard mornings, construction nights, paychecks funneled into Brianna's cameras, lights, trips, his credit tied to her hidden accounts, tens of thousands he'd only just discovered, missed anniversaries, shelved dreams, a body breaking under the weight of her empire. He pulled a folder from his bag, receipts, bank statements, even a handwritten log of overtime hours, kept out of hangdom. This is what I gave, he said, sliding it across. She's calling me lazy now, controlling. I'm neither. Emily's eyes flicked through the papers, her expression unreadable but focused. She's building a narrative, she said, tapping a nail on the desk. We'll dismantle it with facts. But it won't be clean. She's got a platform and she's using it. Brianna had moved out days after their fight, into a downtown loft Jack couldn't afford to look at. Her Instagram, now at 500,000 followers, spun a new story, a woman breaking free from a stifling marriage. Posts hinted at Jack without naming him, captions about shedding dead weight, choosing growth over comfort, comments piled up, her fans cheering her glow up, painting him as the villain without a face. Then came the legal filing. Divorce, with demands for the apartment, their savings, even his truck. Her lawyer's letter called Jack unambitious, claimed he'd hindered her potential. The words burned, but worse was her public smear. Tweets about control, interviews with local blogs implying he'd held her back. She's lying, Jack told Emily, his jaw tight. I built her sets, paid her bills. I thought… He trailed off, the memory of her rooftop photo with Derek Ray flashing like a blade. I thought it was for us. Emily didn't flinch. She's betting on her image, polished, untouchable, but image cracks under evidence. We'll show who carried what. They prepped for weeks. Jack dug deeper, unearthing more proof, emails where he'd coordinated her brand deals, texts where she'd promised we're a team, pay stubs tied to her equipment purchases. He found a contract he'd co-signed for her first big collab, his signature locking him into debt she'd never mentioned. Every document was a shard of their life, proof of his labor woven into her success. Emily cataloged it all, her questions sharp but kind. You kept this much? She asked once, eyeing his folder, now thick as a brick. Didn't know why, Jack admitted. Just felt… important. It is, she said, a rare smile breaking through. This is your voice now. The first court date loomed, and Jack felt the weight of it. Brianna's lawyer, Hargrove, a shark in a three-piece suit, would twist every truth. She'd walk in, camera thrown her followers' cheers echoing online. Jack had no platform, no crowd. Just Emily, his folder, and a stubborn need to stand for himself. He thought of his dad's old saying, truth's like good lumber, plain but it holds. As he left Emily's office, the city buzzed around him. Honky-tonks spilling music, tourists snapping photos. Jack didn't look back. He'd spent years building Brianna's world, nail by nail. Now he'd build his case the same way. Steady, unflinching, no matter how hard she pushed back. For the first time since that night at the counter, staring at her secrets, Jack felt something solid under him. Not hope. But ground. The Davidson County Courthouse was a pressure cooker, its air thick with anticipation. It was mid-2018 and Jack Thompson sat at the plaintiff's table, his hands clasped to keep them steady. At 28, he felt the weight of a decade's labor in his bones, years poured into a marriage now dissected under fluorescent lights. The gallery buzzed, reporters scribbling, Rihanna's fans whispering, locals drawn by the drama of a social media star's divorce. Jack's denim jacket hung stiff on his frame, out of place among the suits, but his hazel eyes were fixed forward, unwavering. Across the aisle, Brianna sat poised, her white dress pristine, her blonde hair catching the light like a halo. At 30, she was a vision of curated perfection, her 600,000 followers a silent army beyond these walls. Her lawyer, Hargrove, had spent days painting Jack as a drag on her success, lazy, controlling, a man too small for her world. Hargrove's words had stung, but Jack had endured worse. Today, though, was different. Today he'd speak. The judge, a woman with a face carved from years of hard calls, nodded to Emily Carter. "Your witness, Miss Carter." Emily stood, her voice clear. "Mr. Thompson will make a statement." Jack rose, his boots heavy on the hardwood floor. The room stilled, every eye on him, some curious, some mocking, most expecting the pickup truck Brianna had mocked. He cleared his throat, the sound rough in the silence, and faced the judge. "Your Honor," he began, "I ain't good with words like her, never was. But I've got truth, and I've got proof. That's gotta count for something." He glanced at Emily, who gave a small nod, then back to the bench. "I spent 10 years building a life for us. Not just me, us. I worked mornings at the lumber yard, nights on construction sites. Paid for her cameras, her lights, her trips to make that brand she's so proud of. I didn't do it for thanks. I did." His voice thickened, but he pressed on. "She says I held her back. Lazy, she calls me. Controlling, but I was the one carrying us. Every dollar I earned, every hour I worked, went to her dreams. I got receipts. Years of them. Bank statements, contracts, my name on debts she never told me about. I got a body that's breaking down to prove it." Jack paused, his chest tight. He'd planned to stop there, let Emily's evidence do the rest. But something snapped. Years of silence, of swallowing her jabs, of watching her rewrite him. He gripped the edge of his flannel shirt, hesitating only a second, then unbuttoned it. The courtroom gasped as he peeled it off, then lifted his undershirt, baring his torso. Scars crisscrossed his skin, jagged lines from saw blades, burns from rebar, a gash from a collapsed beam that nearly killed him. His back was a map of pain, muscles knotted from labor, vertebrae misaligned from years of lifting her world. "I ain't lazy," he said, voice steady now, raw with conviction. "These ain't from sittin' around. These are from buildin', not just houses, but her. She's the marble palace everybody sees, all polished and perfect. I was the bones underneath, holding it up. And she forgot that. Forgot me." He lowered his shirt but didn't button it, letting the scars speak. The gallery was silent, no whispers, no laughs. Reporters' pens froze. The bailiff's jaw twitched. Even Hargrove, usually quick with a barb, sat motionless, his papers untouched. Jack looked at Bree. Was it shame? Fear? Jack couldn't tell, but for once, she wasn't performing. He turned back to the judge, his voice quieter but firm. "I don't want her fame, don't want her followers. I just want what's fair, what I earned, what I built. That's all I'm asking." Jack sat, his heart pounding, the room still heavy with silence. Emily touched his arm, a subtle anchor, and leaned to whisper. That was enough. The judge adjusted her glasses, her expression unreadable but focused, and called a brief recess. Murmurs rippled as people filed out, but Jack stayed put, staring at the brass scale above the bench. He'd stripped himself bare, not just his shirt but his soul, and it felt like shedding a weight he'd carried too long. Brianna stood, her heels clicking as she hurried out, Hargrove trailing her. She didn't look back. Jack exhaled, slow and deep. Whatever came next, evidence, rulings, verdicts, he'd done what he hadn't in years, stood up for himself. And that, more than anything, felt like ground reclaimed. The Davidson County Courthouse crackled with tension, like a storm about to break. Jack Thompson sat at the plaintiff's table, his scarred hands folded, his heart still thudding from his statement moments ago. The Nashville summer pressed against the windows, but inside the air was cold, sharp with the weight of what was coming. At 28, Jack had bared his soul and his scars to a room of strangers. Now it was Emily Carter's turn to wield the truth he'd carried for years. The judge, her gray eyes unyielding, nodded to Emily. "Miss Carter, your evidence." Emily stood, a slim figure in a navy suit, her folder thick with Jack's life receipts, statements, proof of a decade's labor. She didn't smile or pause for effect, just walked to the center of the courtroom, her voice cutting through the hush. "Your Honor, we've heard Mrs. Thompson's claims. Mr. Thompson is a hindrance, a man of limits. But the evidence tells a different story, one of exploitation, deception, and betrayal." The gallery stirred, reporters leaning forward, Brianna's fans shifting uncomfortably. Brianna herself sat across the aisle, her face a mask of composure, but her fingers gripped her purse too tightly, knuckles pale. At 30, she was still a vision of blonde hair perfect, dressed camera only. But her eyes flickered, wary, as Emily opened the folder. "Exhibit A," Emily said, holding up a stack of bank statements. "Hidden accounts in Mrs. Thompson's name, tied to Mr. Thompson's credit. Over $47,000 in charges he never authorized. Hotels, boutiques, travel, all while he worked double shifts to fund her career." She handed copies to the judge and Hargrove, Brianna's lawyer, whose smirk faltered as he scanned the pages. "Exhibit B," Emily continued, her tone relentless. "Hotel bills from Los Angeles, Miami, Chicago. Dates matching Mrs. Thompson's business trips. Many in the name of Derek Ray, a music producer." She projected a receipt onto a screen. "A $3,200 charge for a Beverly Hills suite. 2 names listed." The gallery gasped, whispers rippling. Brianna's head snapped up, her lips parting, but she said nothing. Emily didn't stop. "Exhibit C, emails from Mrs. Thompson to Mr. Ray, discussing transfers from a private account, $15,000 siphoned from joint savings Mr. Thompson built. Funds he earned, she spent without his knowledge." She laid out screenshots, each one a nail in Brianna's polished image. The judge's pen scratched furiously, her brow furrowed. Hargrove stood, flustered, his tie askew. "Objection, Your Honor. This is irrelevant to the divorce terms. My client's personal relationships—" "Overruled," the judge snapped, her voice like a gavel. "This speaks to financial misconduct, Mr. Hargrove. Sit down." Emily pressed forward. "Finally, Exhibit D, contracts for Mrs. Thompson's brand deals, co-signed by Mr. Thompson. He backed her first major campaign, risking his credit when she had none. Without him, there'd be no empire." She turned to the gallery, her eyes briefly meeting Jack's. Mr. Thompson wasn't a hindrance. He was the foundation, and she embezzled from it. The courtroom fell silent, the weight of her words settling like dust. Jack stared at the floor, his chest tight. Every receipt, every email was a piece of his life. Of late nights, skipped meals, dreams deferred. He'd given it all, only to see it twisted into her story. Now, Emily had laid it bare, and the truth felt both heavy and freeing. The judge leaned forward, her gaze piercing Brianna. "Mrs. Thompson, these are serious allegations. Fraud, embezzlement, breach of trust. Your counsel's narrative doesn't align with this evidence. Care to explain?" Brianna's mask cracked. Her eyes darted to Hargrove, who fumbled with his notes, stammering, "We'll need time to review, Your Honor." She opened her mouth, closed it, her hands trembling. For the first time, she looked small. Not the untouchable star, but a woman caught. The gallery buzzed again, but not with laughter. Reporters typed furiously, fans whispered, disillusioned. One woman, a local who'd followed Brianna's rise, shook her head, muttering, "She played him." Jack's story, his scars, his quiet labor, had taken root, resonating with those who'd seen him as a punchline. He wasn't just a man scorned, he was a mirror for anyone who'd given too much, only to be erased. Jack met Emily's eyes as she sat, her nod subtle but sure. He exhaled, slow and deep. Brianna's empire was crumbling, not with a bang, but with the steady drip of truth. He didn't feel triumph, just relief, like a knot loosening in his chest. The judge called a recess, her scowl lingering on Brianna, and the room erupted into murmurs. Jack stayed still, the brass scale above the bench glinting like a promise. Whatever the verdict, he'd reclaimed his voice. That was enough for now. The Davidson County Courthouse felt smaller now, its high ceilings and polished wood no longer looming. Jack Thompson sat at the plaintiff's table, his hands steady for the first time in weeks. It was late summer 2018, and the trial's final day hung heavy with the promise of closure. At 28, Jack bore the marks of a decade's labor, scars on his skin, weight in his eyes. But today he sat taller, his denim jacket a badge of endurance. The gallery was packed, reporters, locals, a few of Brianna's fans still clinging to her myth. Their whispers faded as the judge entered, her gray eyes sweeping the room like a blade. Brianna sat across the aisle, her posture rigid, her white blouse crisp, but her face strained. At 30, her influencer glow had dimmed. No Instagram filter could hide the cracks Emily's evidence had exposed: hidden accounts, embezzled funds, hotel bills with Derek Ray. Her 600,000 followers were a distant shield now, irrelevant in this room where truth held court. Her lawyer Hargrove shuffled papers, his confidence eroded by yesterday's fumble. The judge adjusted her glasses, her voice firm. This court has reviewed the evidence, financial records, contracts, testimonies. The picture is clear. She fixed her gaze on Brianna, who flinched. Mrs. Thompson, your claims of being hindered are contradicted by facts. Mr. Thompson's contributions, labor, income, credit built your career. Your actions, unilateral accounts, unauthorized spending, constitute financial misconduct. This court does not reward deception. Jack's pulse quickened, but he kept his face still, anchored by Emily Carter's steady presence beside him. The judge continued, each word a hammer striking true. Mr. Thompson, your sacrifices are documented. Years of overtime, debts assumed for your wife's ventures. Your testimony and evidence prove you were not a liability but an asset misused. She paused, flipping a page. The court awards Mr. Thompson the following: sole ownership of the 2012 Ford F-5150, the cabin property in Robertson County, and 70% of the joint savings. $32,000, reflecting his contributions. The gallery murmured, pen scratchings. Mrs. Thompson remaining savings adjusted for debts she incurred independently. Brianna's head snapped up, her lips parting in protest, but Hargrove's hand on her arm silenced her. The judge's tone sharpened. Mrs. Thompson, consider yourself fortunate. Fraud charges could have followed, but this court prioritizes equity over punishment. She banged her gavel. Case concluded. The room erupted, reporters typing, spectators whispering, a few clapping softly. Jack exhaled, the sound lost in the chaos. He didn't look at Brianna. Didn't need to. Her empire was fraying beyond these walls. Posts deleted after Emily's evidence leaked, sponsors pulling deals, comments turning sour with hashtags like "Truth Hurts." Her marble palace was crumbling, and Jack felt no urge to kick the rubble. Emily touched his elbow, her voice low. You did it, Jack. You stood up. He nodded, throat tight. Couldn't have without you. She smiled, packing her folder. Go live your life now, you've earned it. Jack stood, his boots steady on the hardwood. The gallery parted as he walked out, their stares softer now, not pity but respect. A reporter called his name, but he kept moving, past Hargrove's flustered huddle, past Brianna's frozen silhouette. She didn't follow, didn't speak. Her heels clicked toward a side exit, her phone already in hand, but Jack didn't care what she posted next. That chapter was closed. Outside, Nashville's heat hit like a wave, the city alive with honky-tonk chords and tourist chatter. Jack paused on the courthouse steps, the sun glinting off his truck across the lot. Betsy, beat up but is. He thought of the cabin, its sagging porch waiting for his hands, the savings he'd rebuild, board by board. No vengeance stirred in him, no bitterness. Just relief, clean and sharp, like the first breath after a long dive. He'd given Brianna everything, his youth, his strength, his dreams, and she'd spent it like loose change. But standing here, free of her shadow, Jack felt something new, himself, whole again. The scars on his body, the calluses on his palms, weren't just proof of pain, they were proof he'd survived. He patted his pocket where a single key rested, the cabin's not hers. A small smile tugged his lips, the first in months. Jack descended the steps, his stride lighter. The city stretched before him, not a stage but a canvas, his to shape, no one else's. He didn't look back. Jack Thompson woke to the sound of birds, not alarms. It was autumn 2018, and the Robertson County cabin, his now by the court's ruling, smelled of pine and possibility. At 29, he was starting over, his body still scarred from a decade of labor, but his spirit lighter, unburdened by Brianna's shadow. The cabin sat on a wooded hill, its sagging porch and chipped paint a mirror of Jack himself, worn but standing. He'd left the Nashville apartment behind, its walls too full of ghosts, and moved here with his truck, his tools, and a determination to rebuild more than just a house. Mornings began with coffee brewed on a stove older than he was, the mug warm in his calloused hands. The cabin was sparse. Bare floors, a second-hand couch, a mattress in the loft. But Jack saw potential where others might see lack. He'd always been a builder, and now, for the first time, he was building for himself. His woodworking tools, dusty from years of neglect, came out of storage. He set up a workbench under an oak tree, the autumn leaves drifting like embers as he sanded and sawed. His first project was a cedar table, simple but sturdy, its grain polished to a soft glow. He carved his initials into one leg, not for pride but to mark it as his. Decorating came next, slow and deliberate. Jack had no use for Brianna's aesthetic, velvet backdrops, curated perfection. He wanted real. He hung a thrift store quilt on one wall, its faded blues a nod to his dad's old cabin. Found a set of antlers at a flea market and mounted them above the fireplace. Built shelves for books he'd never had time to read, dog-eared westerns, carpentry guides, a poetry collection he'd bought on impulse. The cabin took shape, not a showroom but a home, its rough edges a reflection of him, rustic, unpolished, honest. Nashville's pull faded, but Jack wasn't a hermit. He'd lost friends in the haze of Brianna's rise, too busy working, too drained to call. Now he reached out. One Saturday he drove to East Nashville for beers with Tommy, a high school buddy who'd never cared about Jack's bank account. They sat on Tommy's porch, swapping stories of old pranks, sneaking beers at Percy Priest Lake, racing bikes down dirt roads. "You're back," Tommy said, clapping Jack's shoulder, and Jack grinned, feeling a piece of himself click into place. More followed. Cookouts with Tommy's crew, a fishing trip with another old friend, Mike. No one mentioned Brianna. They didn't need to. Jack's laugh, louder now, said enough. He found new connections, too. A flyer at a hardware store led him to a hiking group, folks who trekked the trails of Radnor Lake every Sunday. Jack joined, his boots breaking in on paths lined with cedar and sumac. The group was eclectic. Retirees, a nurse, a quiet painter named Lena who sketched wildflowers. They didn't pry, just shared water and stories as herons skimmed the lake. Jack, who'd spent years carrying others' weight, felt lighter here, his steps matching the rhythm of people who asked nothing but his presence. One dusk, watching the sun sink behind the hills, he realized he was smiling. Not for a photo, but for himself. Woodworking became his anchor. He spent evenings in the cabin's glow, crafting chairs, a bookcase, even a birdhouse for the porch. His hands, once tools for Brianna's dreams, now shaped his own. He started sketching again. Not plans, but ideas. A carved headboard, a rocking chair for the porch. The act felt like breathing, each stroke reclaiming a dream he'd shelved. A local shop took his smaller pieces on consignment, a cutting board, a set of coasters, and when they sold, Jack didn't chase profit. He bought better tools, kept creating. Fulfillment crept in through the cracks. Mornings splitting firewood, the axe's thud a steady pulse. Afternoons reading on the porch, a breeze carrying the scent of earth. Nights by the fire, a whiskey glass catching the flames, no phone to interrupt. Jack noticed details he'd missed in the grind, how the stars sharpened without city lights, how coffee tasted better slow. He wasn't rich, wasn't famous. The savings from the trial, $32,000, covered repairs, tools, time to find his footing. But wealth wasn't the point. Peace was. One evening, sanding a chair under the oak, Jack paused, his hands tracing the wood's grain. He thought of the courthouse, the scars he'd shown, the life he'd fought for. That Jack felt distant now, not gone but softened, like a bruise fading. He looked at the cabin, its windows warm against the dusk, and saw more than a building. It was proof he could start again, not as Brianna's foundation but as his own man. The birds sang on and Jack went back to work, the rhythm of his hands steady, sure, enough. Jack Thompson stood at his cabin's kitchen sink, washing a chipped mug as dawn painted the Robertson County hills gold. It was spring 2019, and at 29 he was a man remade, not polished but whole. The cabin, once a sagging relic, now hummed with life, cedar table gleaming, shelves heavy with books, a quilt softening the walls. Outside, birds called, their songs weaving through the open window, and Jack's hands, scarred, calloused, steady, moved with the ease of someone who'd found his place. The trial, the courthouse, Brianna's betrayal. All felt like echoes now, distant as the Nashville skyline he rarely saw. His phone buzzed on the counter, a rare intrusion. Jack dried his hands, expecting Tommy or Lena from the hiking group. Instead, the screen lit up with a name he hadn't seen in months, Brianna. His chest tightened, not with pain but surprise, like stumbling on a bruise he'd forgotten. The text was short. "Hey Jack, been thinking, miss you. Maybe we rush things, can we talk?" A second followed. "I'm in town, coffee." He stared at the words, the phone heavy in his palm. A year ago, they'd have pulled him under, her voice, her promises, the hope he'd clung to through years of sacrifice. Now, they were just letters on a screen, no more weight than the sawdust he swept from his workbench. He set the phone down, leaning against the counter, and let his mind trace the path that brought him here. Brianna's world had unraveled since the trial. Jack didn't follow her posts, hadn't looked at her Instagram since the day he'd seen her with Derek Ray. But Nashville talked. Her brand, once a beacon of aspiration, had cracked under scrutiny. Sponsors dropped, her fans turning, hashtags like fake V-vibes trending after leaks of her court losses. She'd moved to LA chasing new deals, but rumors said she was scraping by, her glow dim. Jack felt no glee, no spite. Her fall was her own, and he'd stopped carrying her weight. He thought of replying, a quick no thanks or good luck, but why? She'd had his words, his years, his everything poured into her dreams until he was hollow. The texts weren't a bridge, they were a hook, baited with nostalgia he no longer trusted. He pictured her now, maybe in a sleek cafe, phone angled for the perfect shot, typing to him not out of love but loss. The thought didn't anger him, it just didn't matter. Jack picked up the phone, his thumb hovering over her name. He opened the contact, saw the old photo tied to it, her laughing at a fair years ago when her smile was real. He didn't linger. With one tap he deleted the number, the texts vanishing like smoke. The screen went dark and Jack exhaled, a slow release of something he hadn't known he held. He walked to the bathroom, the floorboards creaking under his boots. The mirror above the sink was old, its edges fogged, but it showed him clearly enough. Jack leaned in, studying the man staring back. Hazel eyes, lined by years of squinting into sawdust and sun. A jaw still stubborn, though softer now, less clenched. Scars on his cheeks, one from a nail, another from a boyhood fall, blending with new creases from smiles he'd earned. His hands, resting on the sink, told a story. Calluses thick as leather, knuckles nicked, veins mapping a life of labor and rebuilding. He thought of the courthouse, bearing his scars to a room of strangers, claiming his truth. Of the cabin, each board he'd sanded a step toward himself. Of hikes with Lena and Tommy's laughter, moments that asked nothing but gave everything. Jack had spent a decade building Brianna's palace, only to find his own foundation stronger, flawed, battered, but his. The mirror didn't show a hero or a victim. It showed a man, and for the first time, Jack liked who he saw. A smile tugged his lips, small but sure. He didn't need her texts, her apologies, her world. He had this, a mug to wash, a table to sand, a trail to walk when the sun rose higher. The birds outside sang louder, and Jack turned from the mirror, his steps light. The cabin waited, his home, his canvas. And beyond it, a life he'd shape nail by nail, not for anyone else but for him. He stepped onto the porch, the air cool with morning promise. Nashville's hum was far off, irrelevant. Jack sipped his coffee, the mug warm against his palms, and watched the hills wake. He was at peace. Not perfect, but enough, and that, he knew, was everything.